Hello, everybody, and welcome. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer. Welcome, and we're happy to have you join us again here for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, High Queen Calidia. Tom, how you doing?
Hello, friends.
I'm going to go through every female character in the Warhammer world on you eventually. I want you.
It won't be that long, so you're
Sure, because there's only like 7 of them, so it's pretty.
not gonna have to suffer too bad.
Also joining us, of course, is a man who needs very little introduction, as I'm sure most people who watch the show know exactly who you are, but also Mittierim. Mittierim, how you doing tonight, sir?
Doing all right, Vince. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, we're happy to finally have you on. Obviously, for a long time, it was very challenging given the timings of our 2 shows, but since you guys went to an alternate schedule, I was like, as soon as that happened, I was like, all right, well, downside, less content from Mittierim. Upside, we can finally get him on the show, which I've been wanting to do since episode 1. So I appreciate you coming on, sir. And tonight we are going to talk about Fluff during our feature segment. We couldn't have the Fluffmaster on and not make this our narrative, our Fluff-focused episode. So, of course, we're going to be getting to that later in the show. For now, though, we're going to start out, as always, with a little bit of the news. So if you see Mittierim's eyes gloss over with various discussions about Age of Sigmar and releases, you'll know exactly why, I'm sure. But that's okay. He's just got to suffer a little bit here at the top of the show to get to the goodness later. So, Tom, take us through some news. What's going on out in the world?
Yeah, so we have the releases for next week, or the pre-orders at least, coming in. We have 2 new characters, the Heraldador and the Vexilor. Really don't know where they're getting these names, but we basically have another standard bearer, and we have a trumpeter,
like a character musician, yeah.
Yeah, a character musician, and they all look the same. No, I mean, there's a guy with a chainmail skirt, which is kind of neat. And they have big lightning bolts and hammers. That's new, right?
It's very new.
Very new. The most significant thing here for me was the fact that the prices actually came down this release around. So they're clan packs that are at $25 and $30 instead of $40 a clan pack for a character.
Well, there's no bird or Griffhound in them, so it's not worth $10.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. That extra $10 to $15 sitting in like 2 ounces of plastic.
Well, it's not about weight of plastic. It's about quality, not quantity. And that little bird and that bird dog are fantastic. I'm a supporter.
We know that. Everybody knows that. So those we have the 2 more characters, unsurprisingly, coming down the line. The hint for next week was what actually got me kind of curious. It was Slaughter, Blood, Skulls, and Cogs. Which it sounds like a Khorne release with Clockwork Beasts. No, with something.
Now, Mittierim, I'm going to make a reference that I know you'll get, although I don't know how many of our viewers will get it. But I was personally hoping for this to be the first release in the all-modern army. I think that would really kick up. The Warhammer Age of Sigmar.
I will go ahead and put it out there for you, Vince. If they did a modern army, that would be all it would take to get me back in the Age of Sigmar. That goes out to Games Workshop right there. If you want the Fluffmaster back, you know what you got to do now.
Exactly. I can just see it marching out with your mod drones and your quad drones. It'd be fantastic. And also, look, if we're playing Planescape in Age of Sigmar, I say just lean all the way into it, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, and not only that, like, man, for those that want to proxy minis, like, not an issue. Go buy a big bowl of dice, spray, go grab your extra arms and legs that are in all your bits boxes, and boom, there you go. Get those little like squirrely eyes that like glue on eyes, and you're done.
To distract for a minute, my wife Alicia, those of you that know her know she does model painting and stuff. For our D&D group, she actually made a rogue modron, which are like the orb ones, out of the spinning ball that came with the Goblin Fanatics.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that was like the body of it, and then she put wire for arms and legs and gave it a sword and a shield. It's pretty awesome.
That's
I love it.
fantastic.
Yeah, I think what it actually, sadly, I think we will both be let down with the lack of a modern army. I think it's probably a reference to the last battle board that hasn't been released yet, because if you look at that, it has like big, what look like circular cogs set into it. That's just my guess.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a possibility. Like one could hope that it would be like the furnaces or some foundries for the like new like fire dwarves or the steam-headed Duerden or whatever the stuff they're talking about. But I doubt that that's the case.
Yeah, I mean they're not going to get like a small release like that. Well, like whenever the new dwarves, whatever, forget that. Whenever the new dwarves come out, or elves, or whatever they are, I mean they're clearly going to get pretty big releases. They got nothing during the end times. That's why the Skaven and the Nurgle stuff just got packed up and re-released on rounds, like because they have nothing coming, right? They already got all their stuff back in end times. These other people who got nothing, I mean, you're gonna see major releases with them. And then we can all complain about how many releases the elves and the dwarves are getting in a couple months, and it'll be fine. We'll just move on.
Yeah, we'll see. Another significant aspect of the release was the fact that there are now battalion scrolls for battalions. So there are like layers to the battalioning that is happening, I guess.
Yeah, I was pretty interested in that. So there was one that's like 3 groups of prosecutors, which are the flying angels, and 1 liberators, just the basic stormcast. And then there's a chamber scroll that sits above that that's 3 of those, plus like the hero battalion, which is just like a crap ton of heroes. And that's like the super exemplary force or whatever. Not exemplary, that was a different one, but like the host, the vanguard force. That's 27 prosecutors to put that chamber together.
So what's the retail on that?
Well,
like base 960, like at $60 a box for 3 of them, right?
Yes, it would be. Yeah, it'd be 60 times 9. If you actually paid retail for all.
Like $540 for just the prosecutors out of there.
Yes, you're not paying that because obviously you're going to use the ones out of the Age of Sigmar box set, which are basically nothing by comparison. So.
They're really ramping up this whole investment thing.
Sure, I mean whatever. You know they want to give you. I don't know how often you're going to play that game, but you know, hey, whatever, it's fine.
And then also this last week we had the release of Ninth Age.
Yes. So, Mittierim, have you looked at any of the Ninth Age stuff?
I've looked a little at it. I've been following it more from morbid curiosity than anything else. I don't think that it is designed with my kind of player in mind. I think it's far more focused on those guys who really want to get together and trash each other's faces with the rules minutia. And for that, it seems to do its job admirably, I'll say that much. And for those folks who wanted a 9th edition that was just kind of sharpening the knife of 8th, I definitely think it'll have some support from those kind of folks.
Yeah. I completely agree with that assessment. You know, I spent a lot of time, I was on a flight today for several hours, and so I spent a lot of time just reading it on the plane. And I started making a list of changes, and after a while I was just like, I don't even know if I want to make this list anymore. It's getting so long. I was like, geez. And you know, once Spittin said this in his studio update, and I think he was dead on. Like, cause I mean, and he's very interested in the project, and certainly a big supporter of it. And I like it. I love community-driven efforts, obviously. But I think they're changing too much. That's what I'll say. Like when I was reading through it, I feel like, you know, you mentioned like sharpening a knife. To me, it feels bigger than most of the edition changes, barring maybe like 5th to 6th and 2nd to 3rd. There's just a lot going on there. I'm sure they would probably say not really. They don't feel that, but to somebody casually sitting outside, it felt like a lot.
Well, I think the thing is that they're comparing it, and those who are interested in it are comparing it to the changes that were made going from 8th to Age of Sigmar, which gives them, because that was so drastic, essentially anything less than that is going to get a pass by its supporters. So I think they're taking the opportunity and just running with it like a son of a bitch.
I think you got a really good point there. You're right. Anything that isn't that, which was obviously this huge shift, right? So anything less than that, they're going to be like, look, we're not that. Right? I think you're absolutely right. It just felt like, to me, so, you know, I think there's a video sort of marinating up in my brain about this. But, you know, Mittierim, I'm sure you're familiar with the concepts of bottom-up design versus top-down design and, like, the difference between those two things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been a much bigger fan of top-down design when it comes to game design, period. I think that just produces a better game. And so for our viewers, whatever, like I said, maybe I'll do a video on it. But effectively, top-down would be like you start with a vampire, right? And you say, he's a vampire. So what do vampires do? And you build rules out that make this thing. You start at the top, the singular concept, vampire. And you build rules under it that make it look like and feel like a vampire, right? So you start with the top of the pyramid, concept. Bottom-up design, you start with the rules. And you just then start grabbing rules and assembling them up to get towards something. So, like, Vampire just ends up being sort of the collection. You're starting with the rules first and ending up at the total concept. It really feels very much more bottom-up than top-down. Again, I'm not bagging on that. This is my personal opinion as a game designer, what I like. I'm not saying one produces a better game than the other. I am saying one produces a game I enjoy more, but who the hell am I? I am no one of confidence. So, but yeah, I mean that's what I read when I read it. And there was a lot there. I will put a link out to there down below at the end of the show. So if people are interested, go check it out. I highly recommend everybody to read it. Don't have an uninformed opinion. If you think it could be something you're interested in and you read it and you like it, then I really encourage you to support it. Because it is a big community effort, and the reality is things like that only work if there is a lot of community support. So I would say if you're not interested, cool, then don't worry about it, move on with your life, play whatever game you want, and be all the wiser for it. Don't bag on people who do. But if you do like it, then, you know, be a vigorous advocate of it, you know, and help them with it. So there you go. That's what I'd say about it. Tom, what about you? Did you get a chance to look at it at all?
I did not, unfortunately.
No, that's all right. I'm sure we'll talk about it more in the weeks to come as it matures. But yeah, I would say go out there, take a look at it. There's a lot of funny things they did, so there you go. You'll be happy to know, Tom, that all your elves are losing their always strikes first in any game, no matter what. Nobody gets to keep your always strikes first.
That
universally reviled.
Doesn't surprise me at all. So I hope
no matter what edition, them elves are not keeping that rule. They're not getting out of here alive with that one.
I hope they're moving to toughness 4 and 5 elves.
Somehow, I don't think that's going to happen either, but hey, whatever, that's fine.
Maybe if they just start strapping them together, like 4 or 5 elves on a single base, like 20 mil base, then...
Exactly. If all of the elves Muppet Man, they can get up to T4. I'll buy that, yeah, absolutely. Takes like maybe 4 or 5 elves, though. They're very wispy.
You just stack them like cordwood and you'll be alright.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to chop through all of them at once, right? I mean, it's just your axe is going to stop somewhere. All right. What other news items have been bounced around, Tom? Anything else?
I haven't seen anything real significant. The like Warseer and a lot of those communities have really dried up news-wise.
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is we know we're on the edge of this, right? I think it's obvious to me that pretty soon we've got our 40K rules coming, right? I mean, that's just simply what's going to happen.
Yep.
I think the other thing that was interesting to me is I saw so this is kind of recent, it's not as much news as something that happened, but the game air paints came out. Mm-hmm. And I've been watching a couple reviews of them, and what's funny is they look like they're actually pretty decent paints. You know, I'm always looking for more paint. And I think for people who want to paint with them normally, that is to say, who are used to the old, who painted in that fashion, like i.e. with a brush, not airbrushing, I think they're going to be like the game air equivalent for the GW range because they're very thin, which I like. But everybody
Like
who's putting it through an airbrush, what's that?
Like the glaze line?
No, I mean they're not that thin. They're more like game air. Like take game air compared to regular Vallejo model color,
Sure.
right? And
Sure.
that's you get the same comparison. But every review I watched of them, and engineer Jeff did a great review. He's a great modeler and hobbyist, and he did a great review where he was like, "I like them, they're fine. Why are they in pots?" And it's it's just like that's the universal thing I've heard from every review with them. Why are they in pots? But I don't know. Well, I plan to check out a couple of them. I'm always looking for more airbrush gold. And I heard I want to know because they made like the Retributor gold or such in that line as well.
Did they? I heard they didn't.
What's that?
I heard they didn't make it in that line.
No, I thought they did. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they made the layer into the gold. They have one of those two new ones in the gold there, I think. Maybe they didn't make the base. Maybe they only made the layer. I don't know. All right. But yeah, I think that's pretty much our news. 2 more little releases. Now, here let's play a quick game here. Let's move off of hard news and move into rampant speculation, rampant pointless speculation. All right, in line with what I sort of posted for the topic of the week this last week. What would you love to see next? What do you hope? Obviously, we've got some 40K, but what comes on the other side of this? What do you want to see? Now, Mittierim, you're probably the least invested in this, but what would actually pique your interest, if anything? Could there be a release? Well, what would you look at and go, oh, that's at least interesting? Not make you buy it, just actually make you go, yeah, it looks neat.
I want to see a big monster. Everything like I said, I've not really been too super into it, but it all seems like most of everything they've got come out so far is infantry, maybe large infantry. I want to see something big and honking, just absolute force centerpiece come out. I mean, maybe like a transforming robot from Spaceship Sigmar or something. I don't know, but just something badass to put in the middle of the table that would be fun to model and paint regardless of whether I'm actually going to play the game or not.
Holy crap, I totally agree with that. And it's funny because that's such a good point. I hadn't even thought about that until you said it, but you're absolutely right. Like, even the big monster that was released, which was the Celestin Prime, wasn't really a monster, right? It's just a dude with a lot of crap around him to make him real tall.
Yeah.
Sitting on a trash tornado.
Right. I mean, I think he's perfectly fine, but you're right. That the Korgorath or whatever is small by monster comparison. He's really not that big.
Where are the chariots?
About his size. What's that?
Where are the chariots?
Right. Yeah. Cavalry, knights, chariots. A big. I got to agree with you, man. It's so funny that hadn't even clicked until you said it. Now I missed it. You're right. Where's my monsters at?
That's because you've been sitting in a puddle of Kool-Aid up to your sternum, man. You need an outside voice every once in a while.
Hey, I appreciate it. You're absolutely right. No, I appreciate differing opinions. And you're right. Like, I've loved most of what they released, and they have been fun to paint. But you saying that, I'm like, man, I want some monsters too. Don't get me wrong. I like infantry just fine. It's perfectly fun. But you're right. That's great. Okay. All right. Good stuff. Tommy, what about you? What do you want to see on the other side of the 40K?
Honestly,
no, lie to me.
I want, as much as I want to see elves, I'm actually dreading their elf release. I think it's going to be terrible. And so, what I actually want to see is I want to see, full-on balls to the wall, not Iron Wardens, that's their hero name. The Iron Drakes. I want to see, the dwarf, Iron Drakes taken to 10. So, big, heavy armored dwarves with guns, with, tanks, and, not just the little helicopter, the little gyrocopters we had before, but, Apaches. I want full out, I want to see them lean in to the tech dwarves, the steam, I want it to be appropriately developed, Does that make sense? So I don't want it to just be like modern or 40K, which is clearly what it is. But like I want it to look like some type of transition piece where like sufficiently Steam like yeah.
So let me throw you something out, Tom, that just occurred to me that I would love to see in a dwarf release, and again maybe enough to pique my interest to come back. I want actually interlocking dwarf shield walls. Like big shield dwarves who literally like the ends of their shields like literally hook together so that they can go into a formation that basically turns them into terrain.
That would be awesome.
Oh my god, that's a good idea.
Yep.
GW, I hope you're writing these down. Mittierim's just spitting out gold for you here. Just start taking notes. Yeah, I love it. I'll tell you, but what I want to see is so like the red slayers or whatever it was that was hinted at in the first book. This sort of weird conglomeration of a bunch of the different races. I think it would be a neat break with the old world. That is to say, not the old world like the story of the old world, but like the way we thought about the game in the old world being in these racially homogenized books, to have a release that was multiple races, that had like some elves, some dwarves, some humans, like some stock humans, actual people who look like humans, not gold robots, and all like together with a bunch of varying, differing sort of things, and the key thing that ties them together is their fluff. That they're all cast outs and survivors, and they're out for revenge and stuff like that. They're this sort of hardcore mercenary company.
So basically want like a murder hobo release? I mean...
No, I want a super cool Dogs of War.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
Can I make a quick observation that's somewhat related to what you just said?
Sure.
This is a little bonus observation for all of our viewers. Go take a look at the Stormcast Eternals, and I'm pretty sure all of them have the human keyword. We keep talking about like the metal robots of the Stormcast, and we've just assumed that like there are a bunch of races stuck into there. But I'm pretty sure that all the Stormcasts actually are sitting on the human keyword.
I think that's true, but they've said like in the background, who knows? There could be anything, men, women under there, whatever. They didn't do a good job of capturing that, if that's true.
Or we could have some like little chubby short Stormcasts coming out of the Duerden Stormcasts. I'm just saying.
I would also accept undead releases of othering types. That got mentioned on my video. Somebody talking about like other races undead, and yes, I am all about that. My favorite unit, back from just to reference Dogs of War again, was the Perazzo's Lost Legion or whatever. Wait, is that the right one? I don't know. The one that was all skeletons of different races. You had like a lizard man skeleton and an elf skeleton and a Skaven skeleton and all that, and they were a little like spear unit. That was fantastic, and I would love to see more and varying types of races, races undeads. I think that would be sweet. I don't think undead are going to get a release for a long time because they had so much during end times, but dream. All right, so there you go. All right, rampant speculation over. Let's turn to some hobby time. So, Mittierim, sir, what's been filling up your free time, your hobby time of late?
Well, it's been kind of a rough time hobby-wise for me. I've been dealing with some health issues that has forced us to kind of downgrade to stuff that's a little less energy-intensive for me personally. So we've kind of fallen back on card games. I haven't really played much in the way of Warhammer, but we've gotten... Me and the boys are starting to get into Magic. Skip hasn't played in a billion years, neither has Michael, so we're doing some Magic the Gathering, and the Pokemon card game, which is very interesting in that Skip has even gotten his wife to play with us. And I've gotten my 4-year-old daughter to play as well, and she has actually called Skip out for tomorrow night's game. So my 4-year-old will take Skip on. We figure it's going to be a fairly even match, so the Vegas odds are on Skip by about 2 points, but it's not by much. So that's pretty much what we've been doing, is focusing more on our role-playing games and just generally less intensive stuff than we were working with Warhammer. I know I'm trying to get more of our Let's Plays for various role-playing games and maybe even some of the card game stuff up on my channel. It's just I've been very drained with everything that's going on and just have not had the energy to do it lately. So.
Well, obviously, we wish you all the best, sir. And I've told you off air, and I'll say it again on the show that I hope you feel much better very soon, man. You are constantly missed, and in presence of any kind. And I support any and all content for any game you put out because it's the quality of what you do that shows through. I don't really care what game you're playing.
Thank you.
But I'm glad to hear some Magic. That's always good. I still try to make it to, at the very minimum, each pre-release for each new set. And I like that. I generally try to, whenever I go to Gen Con, I'm always doing some drafting at like midnight at least one of the days. That's always fun. Drafting at 1 a.m., there's nothing like it. You just need to get so tired that you can barely read the cards. You've been awake for like 24 hours at the convention. That's the best kind of draft.
Interestingly enough, I hadn't played Magic in pushing 8 to 10 years at this point. And we were gearing up for some of the new Pokemon stuff, so I went through my collection. And I took out 15 cards out of my Magic collection. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go down to my local store and sell these cards and just put whatever proceeds that I could get from these 15 cards into Pokemon for me and my wife and my daughter. So 15 cards, for those of you who are not card fanatics, is the equivalent of one booster pack. With this one booster pack of equivalent of Magic cards, I got enough to end up getting 2 theme decks for Pokemon and 26 additional boosters.
Pretty good.
So,
good conversion rate.
Yeah, I'll take one for 26 or better than that any day of the week.
Sure. I shudder to think of what you might have gotten rid of, but I don't want to cry. But anytime I hear people selling Magic cards, I'm like, I get twitchy. But I'm glad that you turned it into such a bounty. And if you had more fun with all of that than you did with your 15, it was a good investment. So there you go.
Yeah.
Vince, I'm sure that your moat and your Jihad are in a good place.
That's what I would say about that. I'm still angry at you, and I will be for the rest of time. I'll be 80 years old. If I make it to that age, I won't. But on my deathbed, I will curse your name for selling my Magic cards. I want you to know that, Tom. Keep that with you for all time. All right. Tom, what about you, sir? What's been filling your hobby time? I think I know the answer to this, but go ahead.
Not a lot. The semester's kicked back off for me, so I've been underwater in work right now. But what has occupied what free time I do have is more time. Unsurprising, it's been kind of the center focus the last couple weeks, and I got a big box of stuff yesterday.
Yeah, we'll have to lock that on you. It's hard to tell because your little bar is blocking it out. But yes, that's a giant pile of miniatures. His entire wargaming table full. Yes.
Right there.
There you go.
And that goes back like 6 feet of all Mantic stuff that came in yesterday from the Mantic Kickstarter. So, yeah. So we're gonna do some sorting this weekend. So.
Yes. How would you say Mordheim is going, Tom? Obviously, you and I have been doing a lot of work on that. How would you say that's been going?
We're getting close. If certain people in the project would write their stuff, we would be a lot farther.
Whoa! Whoa! Accusations getting thrown around.
Throwing people into the bus.
Mostly true.
We're doing well. We're doing well, and I think that we're very close. I mean, we're going to be easily over 100 pages on this document. So, yeah, there's a lot.
Going to be big. Yes, and I'm getting together with Tom this weekend to hopefully we can put this to bed, and then I'll spend the next week sort of formatting it and getting it into an alpha state to release. So, so hopefully very soon. So yes, me myself been working on that, and then obviously a couple painted models, and although I've been traveling a lot this month, which is also cut into my hobby time. Hence, you may have noticed I'm not in my normal location. The observant people out there watching the show may have caught that. But
you're in the center of your screen.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, not like way down here, like this or something. Yeah.
Yep.
in my favorite location when I'm at home. But I obviously finished up my converted Celestin Prime, finished up another Blood Crusher, and what I was doing before I left was, like late last night, was just prepping models, just gluing together stuff and converting and prepping a bunch of models, because my wife is gone all of next week. She's going on like a girls' trip vacation. So I was like, all right, just lining them up. I just want a bunch of stuff ready to paint. So it's just everything has been scraped and glued and bases prepared and just like ready to be attacked. That was all I focused on for the last day or so, just lining them up. So yeah, should be good. Hopefully turn around a lot of stuff soon. That Celestin Prime is maybe... Tom, what's my catchphrase? What do I say, Tom? Maybe the best model I've ever done. As you accuse me of saying every time I paint a model.
It's true. It's true.
All right. Well, let us then turn from hobby time into our feature segment. So this week we had the Fluffmaster on, and as I've said before on the show, I honestly think that the fluff for Age of Sigmar doesn't really exist yet. That is to say, I know there's a couple books, but it's not real. Because there's a whole ton of War Scrolls and 30 years of history, and all those War Scrolls, the way they describe everything, it's still all the old world stuff. There's warrior priests and white lions, and they reference Ulthuan and crap like this. There's lore masters of Hoeth and other places that don't exist anymore, theoretically. So, to me, the weight of the old world fluff is still there. Like, the new fluff, it just isn't real. It's whatever, there's Space Station Sigmar, and that's all fine, but there's just, it's not enough. It's a tiny, it's a moth coughing against a symphony orchestra of 30 years of fluff and weight. You just don't hear the moth cough. So I thought we would take this time to focus on some of the best and the worst fluff from all of Warhammer's history, because there have been some highs and there have also been some lows. I would argue more highs than lows, but hey, whatever. Maybe you think differently. So what we're going to do is move through just sort of some best and worst of fluff in various little ways. And as usual, Mittierim, you are our special guest, so you get the wonderful blessing and the curse of getting to go first. I thought this first round we would actually start off with our sort of favorite vignette or story that we ever read in Warhammer. This could be from a novel, from an army book, could be from anything. Could be like a small aside, one paragraph, or bigger, that you've read. So, Mittierim, start us off.
Okay. I think my favorite, I'm going to have to go with, and it's funny that I choose this one because I actually hated the character it was attached to. I hated the model. But there's a little story in the Ogre's book about how Greasus Goldtooth comes to power. And he's basically just this young punk ogre. And his goal is to unite all the ogre tribes. So he's having to go to each ogre tribe and basically take on their biggest and best. And so he gets to the first tribe and is like, I'm the boss now, what do you guys want? And the tyrant of the tribe is like, screw you, kid. I'm not going to listen to you. So he challenges the tyrant of this tribe. And the tyrant of the tribe pulls off his gut plate, gets ready for this ceremonial combat, and walks down into the maw pit, which is, for those of you who don't know the ogres, it's basically this big spiked-lined pit that's big enough for ogres to stand in. And so Greasus's response, instead of going down there and fighting, is he leaps off the top of the edge of the pit and belly flops right on the tyrant's head, snaps his neck, kills him in one blow. And then just proceeds to eat him in front of the rest of the tribe. And everybody's like, you cheated! And he's like, you want to do something about it? And two of the tribe's bruisers go down into him, and Greasus turns around and kills those two and eats them as well. And it was just this... It was one of the best showings of the fact that the ogres could be cunning when they need to be. I thought it was just kind of everything about the ogres encapsulated in one little story, and it'll stick with me forever, I'm sure.
Nice. I like it. Very good. Excuse me. Woo. Tom, what about your favorite vignette or story?
So I'm going to draw some heat for this one.
Oh, of course.
Of course. And rather than going small, I'm going to go big. Okay. And so for me, the story that I loved was Malekith's story. And I mean that the entire arc of Malekith's story, not just... Okay, so I had mentioned while we were going through the end time stuff and while that was transitioning that, like, if you go back and read the Army books, you can tell in 8th edition that they've been working towards this end times end for a while in 8th edition, and they've went back and tweaked all the stories in order to, like, let everything line up. And so, and Malekith's story, I think, is a real highlight of this. You know, a lot of people didn't like the twist of, like, the reality is Malekith was right in his claim of the Phoenix Throne. But you know what? Like, I'm a High Elf player. I came to Warhammer because I loved High Elves and I wanted to paint High Elves, and I loved the story. To me, it drove home how prideful the High Elves were in maintaining a lie amongst their Phoenix King for millennia. You know, that no one of them could face the hard truth, and that the entire line of the Phoenix King was driven mad because of this. Well, I'd say that, like, cheapens Malekith's character, but I say it doubles down on it, that, like, Malekith wasn't worthy for the throne the first time because he was too weak. He was too weak to stay in the flames, and he ended up having to pull out. He was bitter because he knew that he was a coward. He knew that by withdrawing that, like, he wasn't worthy of the Phoenix Throne, but he did also know that the Phoenix Throne was indeed his. And so I loved his redemption, and so, like, I felt like the ultimate, like, man, it was so well written, that final scene where, like, the end is there, the world's falling apart, and he jumped, like, so basically the whole world is essentially over at this point, and they know it. The good guys have lost. The world is shaking apart, and in the midst of this hopelessness, Malekith still jumps in the way of Alariel, knocks her out of the way, and saves her life from falling debris, and gets crushed underneath it, thus fulfilling the prophecy that he would die by a male sorcerer's hand, his own, and that he ends up sacrificing himself for Alariel, which shows how truly grown he has as a character. So, like, I just loved the arc. It was fantastic. And a lot of people were critical of it, but I just think that it's probably some of the best, like, storytelling that Games Workshop has done.
Nice. I actually do really like the Malekith story as well, and I think he gets one of the better arcs in the end times. Mine is actually a very simple, small, little story. It comes out of the 5th edition Bretonnian book, which I would recommend everybody get, by the way. I don't care if you're not a Bretonnian player. You can generally find this book pretty cheap. It's amazingly worth it. It's really just beautiful fluff, and it's very unique in the Warhammer world because it's so different than everything else. But anyways, in the back of that book, there's a story called, like, the Questing Knight's Tale. Just a little one-page story, and it's about 2 little brave questing knights that head out and are both seeking after the Grail, of course, because that's what questing knights are questing after. And they come to within sort of a hair's breadth of their goal, and there's, like, a fight with a beastman, and one of them basically makes a brave sacrifice. And part of the whole story is that one of them, by choosing to sort of not get the Grail, like, he's within distance to touch his ultimate goal, to fulfill his life's purpose, and he turns it down to help his friend. Right? And it's just such a good story, and it represents everything noble and chivalrous and wonderful that realm is supposed to stand for. That even these knights who have one singular purpose in life, honor and loyalty and chivalry, was still to be put above all of that, right? And the end never justified the means, right? I just thought it was a wonderful morality tale and a wonderful story that really wrapped up the world. So check it out if you happen to have a copy of that book. Go read it again. If you can't, I'm sure it's online somewhere. It's worthwhile trying to beg, borrow, or steal that old 5th edition book. Somehow I don't think Games Workshop's going to come after you if you get an illicit copy of the 5th edition Bretonnian Handbook. Not very valuable anymore for actual game purposes, but wonderfully valuable for fluff purposes. Hashtag 5th edition Bretonnia is my Bretonnia. All right, so that's a long hashtag. All right, very good. I liked all those. All right, so now we turn to a little best and worst. So we'll do both simultaneously. So for our first round of best and worst fluff of a total army. So best fluff for an army, worst fluff for an army, like for the whole army, not an individual unit, but the whole thing to boodle. Mittierim, once again, you can start us off, sir.
Okay. My best, I'm going to choose the Empire. I think the great thing about the Empire is it takes just enough sort of cues from history that it is familiar, but they add enough of kind of their own take to everything to make it truly unique. Like, if you look at the Empire as a whole, it is very different. The way the Faith of Sigmar works, the colleges of magic, the engineering schools, there's a lot of moving pieces in the Empire, and just the way it's constructed, I think it feels exactly like it should. It's like there's a lot of very separate pieces that fit together very, very well. And maybe there's a couple of hit and misses, but you look at the Empire and you can see a fractured people trying to kind of hold themselves together and forge something better than their individual parts. And you see some great characters. You see just flavorful, crazy, just everything. I think they've got a little bit of everything, and it's put together in such a way that it feels right. It feels believable. And I think that's where some of the other armies fall short for me, is that they go so kind of monotone in their fluff and their feel that they stop feeling real, and I never felt that about the Empire. Yeah,
I love that. That's absolutely true. They've had so much attention lavished on them, right? And you're right. You always felt like you didn't need the whole Empire to even have an interesting story, right? You could take one chunk out of it and tell a story about some small piece, some area, and it would still feel cohesive and full, and it wasn't anemic. There was just so much going on there. Yeah, I totally agree. And obviously, I thought Karl Franz was an amazingly compelling character. My first piece of fluff I ever read in Warhammer that I liked was the story of Karl Franz in the 4th edition Empire book, where the sort of spirit of Sigmar fills him and he crushes this massive orc war boss. It's the stuff of heroes right there. Like I was like, oh, okay, I'm in for this game. I mean, that's what moves you. All right, I love it. Tommy. Oh, I'm sorry. What was your worst? Not to jump ahead. That was good best. What's your worst?
My worst, and to a certain degree, I'm going to restrict myself to pre-end times in this statement, because I think the end times did a decent amount to redeem this army for me. Is the Dark Elves. For a lot of the same reasons why I loved the Empire, I hated the Dark Elves. They were just so cartoonishly evil that they broke all sorts of verisimilitude. I could never really look at any individual part of the Dark Elves and go, you know what? I can wrap my brain around that. I can get in that and see how that's a working society. Theoretically, I mean, if things went like all of the fluff from the beginning held out, the Dark Elves should have lasted about 2 generations after they broke away from Ulthuan before they murdered each other. And I could never see how that could make a sustainable society, particularly with the age of the Dark Elves and theoretically how difficult it would be for them to reproduce their numbers in any strength. They should have been dead. And I mean, the only reason I think they lasted so long is that GW liked putting half-naked Dark Elf women and witch elves up, and it sold models, but they make no freaking sense story-wise at all.
Yeah, I agree. Aesthetically, very compelling, but story-wise, how exactly does your culture work when it's based on murder? Also, I would think they'd just be dying left and right from, infected cuts, since everything they have is just full of sharp blades sticking out from every single accoutrement in their house. They would just, So, yeah, I'm totally with that. All right, I like it. All right, Tom, best and worst fluff for a whole army.
So I'm going to push back, kind of. And so my best army, I would say, are the elves, period. And what I mean by that is, like, the high elves are nonsensical as a race without the dark elves. Like, if you read through the high elf history, they as a race, and likewise the dark elves aren't their own thing. That's the problem, is that they are a piece of a whole. And so for me, the lore, I always took, like, both halves. Like, you had to be reading both books to really understand what's going on, because all the history is about the war between these two races, continuously and repeatedly, and that's what the end times saw and identified and and pulled that thread and said, these two races really are a single race that has truly been at each other's throat for millennia, and here's the reality. They are more interesting unified, and they're much more alike than they are different. And so I would say that, like, I think that I like them as a whole, and the narrative cohesion that they create as a whole, certainly better than the dark elves alone. But I would say even as the high elves alone, I think that I like the fluff. And let me just say this: I also like the fluff of the high elves as, like, there are high elves in lots of different books and fantasy and Tolkien and all that, but I loved the they are haughty, they are prideful to a fault. And what I mean to a fault, like truly to a fault, where like these are not good guys. Like they are probably one of the closest things to good guys in the setting, and yet they are certainly not good guys. And I appreciated that about that. Like that added a depth and a relatability to the high elves that is often not there in a lot of other fantasy settings, because they are truly
flawed heroes are always your best heroes, right?
Yeah, they are truly flawed beings. And you see that in the like I just think about the interaction between Teclis and Tyrion at the beginning of the end times. They really epitomize the true pride of the true flawedness of their race in that interaction, and in their bullheadedness, and in their being locked on to what they are doing, whether it's trying to save one's daughter or trying to save the world, to the cost and to the detriment of all else, because their own priority is the priority, and I think they model that so well, even amongst siblings.
All right, good stuff. So, what's your worst?
Lizardmen.
All right.
Because to me, like when I read through, like they always seemed like a late addition to the Warhammer world. So they're on this other continent where no one else is, and their chaos is true foil, but they're over there in that continent, and they're kind of staying there, and they have a grand plan, kind of like the Cylons, but nobody really knows what it is, and they're not where chaos actually really is, and the culmination of the story is, oh, chaos here, double guns, we're out. You know, they're whatever the plan was, nobody knows, and they just left. Like they bailed on everything. Like it was the biggest letdown of a narrative I have ever seen. There's this huge build-up, and suddenly they're like, we're out. And like, man, talk about like, it was such a letdown. The core central message of the race and of their narrative literally just evaporated with the falling of a moon.
Yeah, they always felt alien to me too, even taking the end time stuff out of it. I mean, like, I get they're supposed to. They're lizards. They're cold-blooded. It's all that. I understand that. But they are hard to relate to, right? Because it's just like they all feel kind of like robots under the control of the Slaanesh is often the feeling you get. I know that's not true, but that's often the feeling you get.
See, I think the biggest problem with the Lizardmen, I have to actually agree with you 100%, Tom. I love the Lizardmen. I like playing with them. The models are great. But I have rarely ever been so let down by a narrative. I think it would have taken a very small change, though, to make them amazing. They were in the best position to be the active member of the forces of order.
Amen. Yep.
Chaos was super active. It didn't even need to, let's be honest, you could cut corners. What the Lizardmen were doing didn't even need to make sense. Just have them out doing things. Have them moving against others, and then if you do shit that doesn't make any sense, just explain it as, oh, the Slann and their giant brains are working on some secret plan. But they could have really taken the position of kind of an elder race to almost like as a race, they could have been in the same position that the Fluff as it was painted the Chaos Gods. In that you're sort of empowering the other races, moving them along these plans, but it would have been a great dichotomy to have a mortal race being that position for the forces of order, and I think they just absolutely, for 30 freaking years, dropped the ball on that one repeatedly.
Yep. Totally agree.
It's a good idea. I hadn't thought about that angle of it, but you're right. Because, again, we've mentioned that the good guys are very reactive in the end times before. That's been a topic of conversation. You're right. They're absolutely the ones that could have been proactive. Yeah. Very nice. All right. I will be quicker with mine. Mine are very straightforward. So, Mittierim, if yours is the Empire, I think it's not hard to guess that mine is the Under-Empire. The Skaven, to me, had the compelling fluff. They're my best winners. I love them. I love their clans. I love their ultra-capitalism gone rampant with no ethics, right? The strong survive, the most cunning, the most brilliant. Plans within plans, all of it. I love the flavor of all these individual clans, the way their society interacted, the Council of 13, everything in the way that the Skaven act is absolutely hilarious and wonderful and engaging to me, and it has such fantastic built-in flavor to it. When you're fielding these things on the table, you feel the fluff just emerge from them. Nothing ever feels generic to me, with the exception of like Skaven slaves or whatever, which are supposed to feel generic. So I've always loved the Skaven and their clan hierarchical structure and their mad obsession and paranoia and the way that they talk, right? Even just their language, the way they have their own little unique way of speaking, how they repeat words and such. So everything about them is just fun and wonderful to me. And they're the most fun you can have with a race of psychotic, paranoid, lunatic murderers, I think. It takes a lot of work to make something like that fuzzy and cute, and yet they do it. So, hats off. My worst, I am actually going to give my worst vote to the Warriors of Chaos, the mortal followers of Chaos, who I cannot understand at all. I don't get it. They make zero sense to me as a thing. Like, the demons are fine. The demons are sort of these, the chaos gods themselves are flavorful and interesting in how they represent these sins and these appetites of mankind, are vices. And the demons are just expressions of those vices, right? So that all rocks. But the mortals are just like, what are these people doing? Why are they doing these things? How do they survive? What does their society look like? This is like, to put this in terms of our world, imagine if all of the Eskimos, or Inuits, I guess is the proper term, that lived up like by the Arctic Circle, which is not a lot of people, by the way, all decided to worship gods of murder and lust and stuff, and then just randomly, and then in the middle of fighting each other constantly, would occasionally saunter down and attack Canada, right? And that's like something sensible. Nothing about that makes sense. If it was this otherworldly threat up there, that it was just demons and things like that, or even maybe beastmen, who, again, beastmen make way more sense, because they're the threat amongst you, right? They're not way up in the north. Beastmen live amongst you, and they are humans mutated, and your baby's born and you abandon them in the woods and blah blah blah. Beastmen are great, but the mortal servants of chaos make no sense to me whatsoever.
What?
Not in any way, shape, or form, and I think they're boring and terrible.
You don't want an extra appendage?
What? And it's just
who doesn't want a tentacle? Come on.
So here's the thing that I'm gonna go to the bat for the mortal servants of chaos here.
All right, do it.
Again, I think the reason why they don't make sense is, again, GW dropped the ball.
Okay.
Ultimately, the only way they make sense is that they are a much more primitive shamanistic society. When you literally think that God is in the tree over there, when a demon manifests and shows magic powers, that is huge power over your tribe and whatnot. So I think the problem is that by introducing the true, Chaos Warriors, i.e. the big suits of full armor and stuff, that made them essentially look the equivalent, or even better in some cases, of the technology of the Men of the Empire, it made it make less sense. I think if they had really pushed the Marauder button to 11 and went, these are just crazy tribal people, go way overboard with the shamanistic style of things, I think it could have made a lot more sense. And it really would have played them up more like the barbarians that they should have been, rather than, here's a cheap way to get an unbreakable demon prince.
No, and that's great. I would totally support that if they were some sort of barbarians at the gate analog, right? Where they're these sort of the Vikings, the Norsca, those actually make sense to me. The Norscan guys, the Marauders, that made sense. They were just sort of the outcasts. They lived right across the bay, as it were, from the Empire. Yeah, sure, they would come in and raid. I get that. Those guys, fine. They live on a coast. They fish. I understand their society. But once you go past that coast and you get up into exactly what you're talking about, Chaos Warrior Society and all this, what is that? What does that look like? What are those people doing? What do they do on a daily basis? What's the day in the life of a Chaos Warrior? If that story's out there, Humble, please, viewers, point me toward the day in the life of a Chaos Warrior. I want to read that. I want to read about, Corny the Corn Warrior waking up in the morning and just going about his day, and just what he does to fill 16 hours of his day. When I assume they still sleep. That's just it. I don't even know. Do they sleep? Do they eat? Is that armor fastened to them?
Yeah. In order, no, yes. Actually, once a chosen is made, or not chosen is in the unit. Once a Chaos Warrior is made into one, the blessings of the Chaos Gods bind the armor to them, and it is only through their ability to essentially kill and or dabble in the sins of their chosen god that they are allowed to essentially maintain their own life force. So they no longer... one of the things it specifically talks about in the most recent Warriors of Chaos book is that is sort of the final step in their evolution before demonhood, is they have denied themselves all of the pleasures and the place in their former lives to become more like the gods that have blessed them. So they give up the ability to eat, to drink, to sleep. They are essentially automatons in service of the Chaos Gods, which is why I always thought it was so dumb that the standard Chaos Warriors were a core choice. The way they're played or they're shown up in all of the fluff is that this is a super elevated form for the rare few. Right. But I can fill my entire army with them because
I think the Chaos Gods need to look at their troop flow, their progression, because it seems to me kind of counterintuitive if they're gods of excess, gluttony and lust and all of these things, that they would want their followers, the higher up they get, to be perpetrating those things and doing those things more robustly, spreading diseases around, through their own bodies rather than encasing them in armor and not letting them partake in fleshly pleasures and all of those things. You'd think that they would be encouraging them to do those rather than locking them away and having them abstain from those things. I don't know. I'm not buying it.
Yeah, you don't think they'd hire a bunch of Jedi? I mean, it sounds like the Chaos Gods founded the Jedi Order and strapped them into brass armor. But hey, whatever. That's, again, all reasons why I don't understand them. So that's why they're my pick. All right. I thought it was supposed to be quick, but crazy warriors of chaos. All right. Okay, let's move on. Best and worst, again, fluff of a single unit. So, Mittierim, start us off. Best unit, worst unit. Go ahead.
No surprise here. I'm going to choose the Noblars.
Yeah.
There is just something so awesome about the Noblars, and more specifically their place within the Ogre army that just, I mean, it just makes you want to use them. I mean, the idea that they're this sort of race of goblins that are so weak and snivelly that they've kind of decided as a unit, or as a race, that it's like, you know what, it's okay if 20% of us get eaten because these big guys will protect the other 80%. And just there's so many fun things in the Ogre book that's happened because of the Noblars. They're sort of kind of connected as favored pets, and just, I don't know, they're just an excellent, fun little edge to what could otherwise be a pretty dark army, and I super like them. Now, I was going to go with a different answer for my least favorite until Tom, your discussion of sort of the Malekith story, because it occurred to me that there is one unit, and it's a character, so it counts as a unit, that pissed me off so bad through the end times that it has ruined all of the fluff by making its story progression just absolutely garbage, and that's Manfred von Karstein.
Damn it, Manfred.
Hashtag damn it, Manfred.
Yeah. He had the potential to be this great sort of behind-the-scenes manipulator, and they painted him up to the end times as this great mover and shaker of the world. Even through Sigmar's Blood, which was sort of like the prequel to the end times, he was solid, and he was the man in power. And then he spent 5 books being a bitch. And at the end of it, he ended the goddamn world in a fit of pique.
Yep.
And just completely, I blame him for everything. I lay everything, my disconnection to the game currently, my distaste for Age of Sigmar, every damn bit of it I put right at Manfred's feet. And
Absolutely.
He sucks so hard I can barely put it into words.
I had 3 Mortarch's boxes, Mitt, and that I had picked up on a thing, and I decided that I was just going to get rid of one of them because I wasn't going to build Manfred.
Archon okay, Neferata okay, Manfred not
Yeah,
worth.
I had the 3 boxes in hand, and I'm like, no, Manfred's never being built. So, yep, getting rid of that one.
Sleeveless jersey, bro, get out of here, okay? Like, you're ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I fully support this choice.
Yep.
All right, good stuff. All right, Tommy, best and worst unit.
My best didn't actually make a appearance in 7th or 8th edition, and that was... Say what?
Wood Elf Chariots?
No.
No, the Praetorian army?
Oh!
Boom! Body shots. No, actually, the Handmaidens of the Everqueen. So, like, the true Handmaidens, not the hero that showed up in the 8th edition, but which was kind of reminiscent of that. But her 100 Spear Guard of the Everqueen, that was the personal bodyguard and the personal kind of dispatch of the Queen. Like the Sisters of Avalorn were kind of that. Like, they wanted to get back at that in 8th edition, so they kind of created the Sisters. But, like, if you read the lore of the Sisters, like, they guard an evil grove somewhere in Avalorn. Like, that's what they do. Like, they're not the 100 that guarded Alariel. And, like, I just love, like, to me, that's so flavorful because you can build that. Like, you can build that force and those people, and they're just, like, it's just dripping with potential and flavor and all that stuff. And so I dug right into it. And there needs to be more chicks in Warhammer, obviously. But I mean, I think that this is symptomatic of a larger thing that I want to point to, which is just regiments of renown in general. I think that, like, to me, they are in essence a regiment of renown, and it was really an underdeveloped thing in the last couple years of Warhammer that I think they could have really run with. Like, if they would have, I love it. I love the idea of these very flavorful kind of twists on, like, I mean, essentially handmaidens aren't really different than female spear elves, like spearmen. But they, because of the flavor and because of the stuff going on, it just makes a very interesting unit. So I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed who they were and what they represented in Elven society, and so yeah. So that's my best is the handmaidens, and then like parentheses regiments of renown is kind of a larger thing that I wish that they would go back to more of. My worst is both of the Morghast Archaei, Morghast Harbingers from End Times. So let me get this straight. There's angels. Like, we're moving through the End Times, and suddenly they're like, hey, here's this new unit. They're angels that Nagash has resurrected. Whoa, wait a minute. Back up. So the cosmology, suddenly, like, there are angels and good gods? Where did this come from? And it was never explained. It was never teased out. It was never explored. Suddenly they're like, oh, by the way, undead angels. Boom. And it's like, you can't do that. And they never followed it up. They never developed it. They never moved forward with that.
You never saw like the living versions of those angels or something.
Right.
One, even if most of them had died a long time ago, you'd think one would still be around somewhere.
Like, and it could have been a great End Times thread for them to pull on or something. And it just killed me because it was it came out of nowhere. It was never explained, and then it was dropped. And like, it's terrible fluff. It's terrible fluff writing if they're going to integrate something like that, but then not actually utilize it.
Well, they're not wanting to defend that because I completely agree with you. Depending upon how far into the other product fluff you wanted to go, in the role-playing games that were set presumably in the same universe, there are a whole pantheon of gods of the Empire that have their own servitor angels and stuff like this, but they're just so low down on the power scale that, I mean, they're really not even anything compared to Bloodthirsters and stuff. They're just kind of lesser demon versions, but I don't see how they would turn into the freaking Archaei, but...
Yeah, like, I just, like... yeah.
Sure. All right. So my best and worst. For best, I'm going to go back to Bretonnia, and I'm actually going to pick the Knights Errant. When viewed through the 5th edition Bretonian lens, as I said, that's the only way I view Bretonnia, because that represents a peasant who has distinguished himself through an act of valor and been risen up to the rank of knight. So, like in the 5th edition book, knighthood wasn't only a birthright. If you were a peasant, if you were anybody, and you were like the hero of your town, if you did some act of valor and chivalrousness and you distinguished yourself, you could be risen up to the rank of knight and be made a knight errant, basically, earning your spurs, as it were. And the Knights Errant get in are these younger and hot-headed knights, but they're also trying to prove themselves. You get the Errantry Wars stories out of the Knights Errant, which is really good. And just as a concept, I just thought they were so compelling because they showed how really Bretonnia was, like, through that lens, through the 5th edition lens, was this true sort of meritocracy, where the ranks of the knights, you were just these ever-shrinking pyramids of heroes, right? And at the top sat, the king, who wasn't just a king because he was by birth and he had inherited it and whatever, blah, blah, blah. He deserved that position, and the Grail Knights were the greatest of heroes. They were living saints, men who had spent their lives in service of goodness and justice and virtue and all this stuff. And so then down there at the bottom was the Knights Errant. And I loved both what they were seeking to become and where they had come from. And I just thought they're, again, a beautiful contrast to a much darker world. My worst, I'm going to cheat and sort of pick two things. And so my first worst, which will be shorter and easier, is demogryphs, because you can't just say those things always existed, you cheaters. That's not how that works. You can't just cut a new unit from whole cloth and be like, oh, that's always been around. No. No, it hasn't. Stop it. No one bought that ever. That was terrible. And you could have just said it was some magical creation, like some crazy beast wizard cooked one up. Like, it would have been that easy. You didn't. You said these things always, they are, like, how 1984 Big Brother doublespeak do you think I'm going to fall for this, man? I know what my ration of chocolate was yesterday, homie. Don't try to pull that crap on me. These things didn't exist. So that right there, but that's, you know, whatever. They don't really have a story to be angry at. Actual unit that I'll pick to be angry at the story is the Lore Master of Hoeth, who is dumb. He's just completely dumb. They're like, you read them, and it's just like, they were the best swordsmen in the world. They're all like super Batman. They were the best swordsmen in the world. They're like the greatest martial fighters, and they got so good at that. And the sword masters, which are themselves like the best sword masters, the best swordsmen. Sword masters are the best swordsmen, and they're the best swords masters. And they get so bored of being sword masters, they're like, I'll just go learn magic. And then they learn all of that too, and they're like, oh, all these lores are so easy. I'll just learn all of them. They're all like super genius Batman. It's like a legion of Doctor Doom spellcasters. They're all just like the most physically dangerous, brilliant people, and they just have no flaws. Apparently, no free time. Maybe they do. They just take some hours a day because they're all, you know, just a bunch of like ninja Einsteins running around just chopping people and learning quantum mechanics. Stupid. They are just dumb, and they are everything wrong with the high elves of like, oh, we're better than you. No, just stop it. It's ridiculous. Stupid. All right, there you go. I hate them, and they make me angry. Okay, so there you go. All right, good stuff. All right, so I think we should close it out here with one more round on the fluff. And instead of doing an actual best and worst, I think our final thing should be something you think is cool that's been forgotten, or some piece of lore that you really like. Not really like, just what is it about the Warhammer fluff in broad strokes? Some big broad stroke thing that you really loved. Like maybe it's what drew you to an army, you know, a large thing, something like that, just in a large sweeping scale. So Mittierim, kick us off.
Okay, I guess I approach this from a different angle.
Fine.
But I think the one thing that I always loved that I think got very easily overlooked was the short story collections that the Black Library put out. I was never a huge fan of the novels that they put out. They're pretty basic as far as fantasy writing goes. You don't ever really get too deep into some of the characters, with the exception of someone like the Felix and Godric novels. But even then, they're not great. However, time and time again with the short stories, they caught lightning in a bottle. They're these little short stories that just give you a piece of the world, and it is just a kernel, and some of those kernels leave you wanting so much more, and it really, like, reading those kind of is what made me dig into the world. And it's like, yeah, there might not be too many great sweeping stories that are that interesting and unique, but there's so many little stories, and it really made you feel the possibility of every character that you make, every army that you fight has its own tale that is part of this incredibly intricate tapestry. And probably the one, if I could recommend anyone to go out and buy the short story collection, is the Age of Legends short story collection. It's all like in the distant past of the Warhammer world, and without fail, every story is freaking amazing. I mean, and it shows everybody kind of in their brightest. If you wanted to read, Vince, about the life of the Chaos Warrior, there's one of the short stories that really focuses on Chaos Warriors attacking the dwarves from the side of the Chaos Warriors. And you kind of get to see how they interact with other races. And there's a fantastic story about an aging Grail Knight kind of allowing his pride to get the better of him sort of in his last days, and just a lot of just amazing stories that I think should have been more to the forefront of people's experiences. So that's my answer to that one.
Nice. I love it. No, that's a great answer. That's fantastic. All right. Tom, what about you?
Do you remember what the lore was of Mordheim? Like what happened that led to the end of the world?
Yeah, sure.
What do you remember?
About Mordheim? The city? It was a fairly opulent city, twin-tailed comet. It's seen as like an omen of positive, and then it comes and it smashes its way into the city and blows it up. And
yes, and so we understand the basic shape, but in prep for Mordheim, I had been digging back through the original Mordheim book. And it's fascinating. So so Mordheim, now in like retrospect, looking through the lens of the end times, you read, and Age of Sigmar even, when you read back through this, like it makes my brain want to explode. Because the twin-tailed comet, they were responding because they were seeing the end times, and they believed that the end times were manifesting in their midst. And there was a prophecy that was being fulfilled. And so there was just a number of things. And like when you think back to, so let me read the prophecy. In the city of his sisters, he will return to us on wings of fire. From his throne he shall reign in incorruptible flesh forever. No death shall there be for those that gather to him there. And the northern lords, yeah, really, like this is in the Mordheim 1999 book. And this is what we've seen with the Stormhost Legion.
Sure.
The Stormcast Eternals, as he has forged people in incorruptible flesh.
Yeah, sure. And taking human form, right?
Say what?
Taking human form.
Yeah, and like he came on wings of fire when the Azir came down and erupted and filled and like brought Karl Franz back to life. Like that was his return. And not only that, but when you read back through, so it was this twisting of prophecy that gathered a bunch of people into Mordheim, and then it was basically like opulence and a bunch of like corruption began in the midst as people were basically like the end of the world's coming, so party hard, and it talks about like but in those endless days no one stopped to sleep but danced, feasted, drank, and gave themselves up to indecent pleasures. And so it ended up being a vehicle for corruption, and which is like what you would expect, knowing that that the whole time Sigmar was trapped by what's his face? Not Karos. I'm blanking for some. By Tzeentch,
yes.
Who the Lord of Fates and all that. And so it's through this the prophecy and that was corrupted. And then what's declared is that the hammer of Sigmar comes and crushes the city, is the language that's used and the result of that, what the actual heart of what that was all Weirdstone, which is itself Warpstone.
Right.
So it being the hand of Tzeentch the entire time. So anyway, so just how this actually weaves into not only the end times but Age of Sigmar, reading through the original the original Mordheim lore, like it blew my mind.
Sure. All right, good stuff. I like it. For me, I'll finish out and I'll just say like a sort of high level thing. I always liked the fluff of the Warhammer world from a high level. I think you're right, Mittierim, when you said like some of the stories, some of the novels. They were fine. If you like them, great. I never could really get into them. I think over a marathon, like that is to say, they're good. The Warhammer world's good at sprints, right? They're not good at marathons. Like most of the stories I like are the shorter things. So I bet I would love that short story book just because that's exactly the way I like my Warhammer fluff. It was always in those little things, those little vignettes that are there in every army book that just show you a quick little aside, a quick little moment, and they give you just this touch and taste of the world. And the world always felt very tactile. The analogies to real history, but at the same time, what was built on top of it. I mean, yes, most of these realms are just knockoffs of some kind of historical, kingdom or nation or something, but that doesn't matter on its own. That's fine. That's just the starting point. It's not like they ended there. They did interesting things with all of them, and just the broad swaths of themes that they tackled, and the way they felt they made the world feel very lived in, right? Everything, and I don't mean like gritty and grimdark and all this nonsense. I hate all of those terms. I just meant the world felt very lived in. It felt like it made sense. There are those things around the edges, like stupid Warriors of Chaos, that I didn't get, and I don't understand how they existed. But for the most part, like, the world made sense. Things were here, this was that, and so on and so forth. And it felt like a cohesive story. And that's what I loved about it. It had a very, I shudder to use the word, but realistic sense to its fantasy, right? And I mean that in all the best way. All right. So before we close out, let's turn to some comments and questions. How's that sound, gentlemen? You ready?
Sounds good.
All right. So let's talk here. So John Tailby left a question, and I think it's something we all need to address. Okay? So here we go. Here is his question. Is everyone ready? How do the economies of the old world work? How do people make enough money to cover all of these military expenditures? I think that is an amazing question, because this world is just like constantly at war, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where now, for the Lizardmen, this is an easy answer. Their whole kingdom's built on gold, so whatever, they're fine. Like, if anything, they have too much money.
I got you on this one.
All right, hit me. I'm ready.
2 words.
Yes.
Gold mages. When one of the big pillars of your society is a group of magical men that can forge gold out of nothing, I mean, that pretty much explains that.
Final transmutation and going to war. Going to war with metal mages means you'll never run out of money. That's the answer.
That's true. And as of I think it was the 5th edition Empire book where the Gold Mage took over, right? He beat out the Bright Wizard. Like, obviously Gelt was the guy who did that. And I think Gelt was in charge from like 5th through 8th. So 6th through 8th, I don't know, somewhere in there. Yeah, so they've had a gold guy at the top for a long time. You're absolutely right. That would fund some coffers. They get him out there just final transing everybody, and they're like, "Quick, grab the turned soldiers and run!"
See, and if you want to go even further back than that to explain like Ulthuan, you got to go back to 5th edition when they had the spells that could actually manipulate the shape of the land. So they would just go to war and be like, all right, well, these are nasty hills that we can't use for farmland. Let's just run them over our opponents, and now they've got all the nasty hills, and we've got nice farmland. So, and you'd be surprised at what good fertilizer a couple of 100 dead orcs can make for you. So there's a lot of benefit into going to war constantly in the Warhammer universe.
3 words: undead kelp farms.
Yes.
Nice. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things you hear about, like, peasants trading, but you don't really often hear, like, which would make sense. They're not having gold wizards, but you don't regularly think about, like, the economy of nations, right? Like, who's moving trade goods. I mean, Marienburg was this rich city based on trade, but who were they trading with, right? Like, where was this? They're up on the north. Like, where was this coming in from?
If the end times is anything to be believed, there is an undead legion in every body of water.
Sure.
So you know that's actually what's going on. It's the undead kelp farms that they are there farming the bottom of the sea.
Well, there was a vampire in charge of Marienburg in the end, so there you go. It all makes sense. I think we really cracked the case here tonight. So, John, hopefully you find that a compelling answer. There you go. That's our answer for money. Gold wizards, elves using magic to reshape the land, and undead kelp farms. Problem solved. There you go. This money situation is wrapped up like an episode of Scooby-Doo. And then I just want to say, give a quick little shout out to Dan, who's watching and had left a lot of great comments. And he also had said that he's pretty excited for the elves and for an elf release going back there, and that he hadn't yet read the End Times, but he would like to give it a shot. Just read some of it with an open mind, maybe skip Thankful. That's what I would say. Focus on Vlad von Karstein, who has a beautiful story. I know even Mittierim likes that one. Vlad has a beautiful story. I wish we could have focused on him more. That's like when I look back at it, that's my lament.
The Nagash and Kane books are fantastic.
That's true. I will say Kane is just a standout book, period. I do love Kane as a book. It also has almost nothing to do with the End Time.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I would be happy if Nagash and Kane were the only two they ever put out.
Right.
I would, like, if I had the ability to go back and redact history, yeah, I'd get rid of the other 3 books and we'd still be sailing fine in 8th.
They are the strong ones. I mean, no doubt. Like, Nagash, just because the story feels so interesting and epic and the characters are relatable of what's going on, and Kane because it's Shakespeare. I mean, that's what it is. Like, it isn't even having, like, it feels like they had the idea for Kane and just sort of inserted it in the End Times. Right? Like, it's completely tangential to the rest of the End Times world.
I mean, yes, it wraps up the Elven storyline. Like,
sure.
and that's what I leaned into in talking about Malekith. I mean, that entire storyline is the heart of the Kane book.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll be honest. The Kane and Nagash are also the only 2 of the End Times books that I didn't end up actually angry at the end. Mm. Like, I was, like, those 2 books I thought were good buys. I enjoyed them. The other 3, I was physically angry that I had spent the money on them. And I only paid for a third of it because we split it. I mean, I was pretty pissed off at the end of the other 3. So.
Gotcha. I will say that the Nagash book obviously ends with hope, which you've got to love. You might be asking, Vince, what are you talking about? How did that end on such a hopeful note? Well, because it ends with Cetra staring off into a sunset, ready to go march off and beat the crap out of some Chaos Gods who were stupid enough to bring him back from the dead. If there's a better vision of hope in the universe, I don't know what it is. That's a hope for a better tomorrow. Vote Cetra. He's your king already anyways, and you don't have a choice in the matter. And then, Kane is just, it really is just like this beautiful sort of heartbreaking story. And the main characters who are in there, which are actually rather tight. It also has, although there are side characters, it really is one of the tighter stories as far as number of protagonists, right? You really do follow these basically 4 people, Tyrion, Teclis, Malekith, and Marathi. I guess Alariel too, through the whole thing. And,
And in extra points, nobody that had a major plot point in either of those books was just randomly forgotten or dropped, like some people. Skarsnik.
To be fair, like the Skarsnik thing, the author of the last book openly came out and said that he had a sort of list of things he had to cover, and he wanted to get Skarsnik on there, and he didn't have the room in the story. But they said, "What's your single greatest regret?" He said that I couldn't do a Skarsnik focused portion of the story. So, I mean, I know that doesn't ease the bomb, but he did write one on his website, like using the voice of that he wrote the book. So, for people who really love Skarsnik, that story is out there on his blog. So, unofficial, but hey, at least it exists in some form. Whatever. It's a little better than fan fiction in that it is actually the author, right?
And it exists as much as the rest of the world does now, so...
There you go. It's all equal. All right, very good. Well, gentlemen, I think that brings us to a close. Any final thoughts before we sign off for the evening?
No, I would just stress anybody who is getting involved in this game with Age of Sigmar, go back and remember where it's come from. There is a lot of great things that I think can add to your gaming experience, even as an Age of Sigmar player that is just laying around in the old editions, Fluff and stuff. So anytime you got a chance to pick up a used army book at a used bookstore for $2, do it, because there is just acres and acres of gold out there to be found.
Completely agree. And the reality is, like I said, that's going to inform a lot of the fluff and backstory of the units you're probably playing with, since that's the war scrolls you're using is the stuff out of the old world. So there you go. Tom, final thoughts?
Keep telling stories.
Oh, very good. All right. And I will simply say, as always, thank you all for watching. We very much appreciate it. We love having you here each week. We hope that you enjoyed our discussion of the fluff, and we want to see you mention some of the things that we talked about down below. Share your favorite fluff pieces, your vignettes, because there is a lot of diamonds out there in the rough of 30 years of history, and I certainly don't know them all and would love to know what you like. So leave it down below, and as always, we'll see you next Wednesday.